Hello and welcome to the Consistency Project Podcast. My name is Patrick Cummings. As always, I'm here with E.C. Sinkowski. Every week on the show, we aim to simplify the science of nutrition, health, and fitness, cutting through the noise to focus on the principles and practices that will help you perform better, feel better, and live better. Thank you so very much for tuning into the show. How are you, E.C.?
Wonderful. How are you?
Great. I'm great. I'm great because hotcakes are back. We haven't had hotcakes in a while.
That's right.
Hotcakes are just when I collect things from the internet that I've read that I want your take on. And I surprise you 24 hours in advance. I send them to you so that you can't do your usual EC deep dive. So this time around, we're going to look at 3 pieces of content that I've saved in the recent months. We're going to talk about meal prepping, eating pizza before running an ultramarathon, and how few meals Americans eat at home. The last one actually really shocked me. So I'm interested in your take on it, but we'll do the first one first. This is a social media post. As I often do with these, like the person doesn't really matter. So I'll just give a little context to who it is. She's got 48,000 followers on Instagram. She says she helps elite athletes perform better. So she's got a bit of an audience. And I like this post because I think this is kind of in line with things that you've talked about before, but there are a few little things that I want to poke at. And so the post is about how nutrition is easier when you let go of these 3 lies. And the 3 lies are: you must meal prep. And number 2, you must cut out all bread, fried foods, sugar, etc. In other words, you've got to restrict a bunch of stuff. And then the 3rd lie is that fresh is always best. And so obviously those 3 things are things we've talked about at least a little bit in part. So I first want to get your take on just like those 3 other 3 lies. Do you agree with them? Where is there maybe some nuance? And then I've got a couple little questions after that.
Yeah, I mean, I think they're good. I love that she's not telling people to restrict foods they don't have to. People probably have to cut down on them, but they probably don't have to restrict them. I love getting rid of the dogma that you need everything to be fresh, and that frozen can be a really economical and healthy way. Canned can be a really economical and healthy way for people to eat fruits and vegetables. So I think that's great. The first one about meal prep is interesting. I think meal prep can be quite helpful for people to stay consistent. So I don't know that everybody has to let go of that, but I think I understand where she's going with that. So I think they're okay. I don't know that I would make them my... like, this is going to solve everything for nutrition. Do you know what I mean? Like, I think in terms of like my top 3, I think they're a little bit specific, but I like the overall intent of them. Yeah. Okay.
I do want to get your 3 lies that you blah, blah, blah. So I do want to get that. We'll make an Instagram post out of it later. But first, you sort of touched on this already, but the meal prep. I don't remember an episode where we've actually talked about meal prep. It may have happened. We've been doing this for a long time. So it may have been in there somewhere. So my question to you really is, why is it meal prep something that you talk about often, something that you recommend, something that you have people kind of put into the practice of nutrition, of their diet? Is it, and you spoke to it a little bit, is it because it doesn't work for some people, because some people just don't like it? Like, just give me a sense of like, where's your head at with meal prepping? Because for some people, it's like the end all be all. If you're not doing that, you're not taking care of your nutrition. But where is it for you? And where is it for you in terms of like when you work with people?
Yeah, I mean, time and time again, people comment how easy the nutrition plan is when they're prepped. I think the nuance there is prep can take on a lot of different forms. Like, prepped could be, for some people, I've, made 3 recipes on Sunday and portioned them out into perfectly measured Tupperware that I'm now going to just execute on during the week. And for some people, that's great because it's kind of, they did all this work, they have these nutritious meals, and then they just follow through on the plan. But prepped could also mean my level of prepped, which is I have fruit in the fridge with yogurt.
Yep.
And so I think that's sort of the nuance, that for me, prepped isn't necessarily I've been making all of these meals in bulk. It just means I have food on hand versus getting to Thursday evening, being tired after work and having no food. And the obvious answer then is DoorDash or fast food or something that's, on the way home or quote easy. And so that's really how I see it and how I mean to interpret it or recommend it to my clients. I think everybody knows, if they follow me on Instagram, I do not think that you need to have really extensive recipes or, again, planning out for 5 days to have healthy nutrition.
You're hinting at it, but you put an ebook together. I think you call it the anti-cookbook.
Yeah.
So, is it just the anti-cookbook? Is that what it is?
Yeah, it's the
anti-cookbook. Can you just talk about like why is that part of your, I don't know if philosophy is the right word, but why is that kind of part of your philosophy? It's more your personal ethos. But can you talk a little bit about that and why you feel like that's a solution? And maybe that's not a solution to meal prepping, but maybe it is a solution to or for folks who just can't get themselves to meal prep for whatever reason.
Because again, I think it just takes a lot of time to make all of these meals. And some of these meals, I'll open them and even people will say, it's fast and easy. I forget what it's called. It's something like, I don't want to put out the name out there because I don't want to put it down, but it's somebody who has minimalist in the title and it's like a pad thai recipe. And there's more ingredients in that thing than I would ever spend the time to put together. And it's like this minimalist, and I'm just like, I don't think this is minimalist. To me, minimalist is less than 5 minutes. And so I put the anti-cookbook together because, in social media land, we really are attracted to these beautiful pictures and these beautiful presentations. And probably even now with, instead of just the Instagram photos, it's the reels with all of the steps and the quick cuts and all of that stuff that some of this stuff, I'm like, yeah, that made a really pretty media piece, but I'm not making that. I mean, until it offers me some huge nutritional benefit or maybe some economic benefit or I don't even know what, over my cottage cheese and 2 pieces of fruit. Like, I'm just going to watch it on Instagram. I'm not making this. And so to me, again, a lot of my clients are looking for sustainable nutrition. And with busy lives and other demands, 15 ingredient lists are not sustainable. And so I just wanted to show people ways that, some of the reason why I'm so consistent is because my meals are rather boring and wouldn't get many likes on social media. They wouldn't draw a lot of traffic is part of the reason why I don't show them. It's like, do you want to see a protein bar, a cup of yogurt, and 2 pieces of fruit again?
What do you say to people who see that and are like, that's so boring, I can't do that?
It reminds me of the Trade-Offs podcast, which I think ended up being more popular than I originally.
Is that the one where you can't have your cake and eat it too?
Cake and eat it too. Yeah. And it's just sort of like, we have trade-off choices to make that if you want your diet to be really interesting and fun, and every time you sit down, it's this new meal that's really healthy, that takes a lot of time. It takes a lot of time. I'm not against it, but just be real about what that is. And if you're somebody who loves to cook and loves to do all the creation, then go for it. And if you're somebody who's looking to make nutrition sustainable, then you're going to have to do a lot of things on repeat because that's what cuts down on the time involved. Yeah.
Okay. I teased it, but I'd love to know, like, if I made you make this post, like, here are the 3 nutrition lies that are standing in the way of your progress. What are your 3 lies?
Yeah, I think one, I will copy her second, I guess it was. And that was just to let go of the idea that you have to give up any food, that every food can be part of a healthy diet is one. I think the other 2 I would make a little bit more broad. My second one would be something along the lines of good nutrition has remarkably wide strike zones, that you don't need this perfect nutrition plan. You just need to eat mostly whole unprocessed foods in the right quantities. But, stop sweating about, 0.7 versus 0.8 protein and organic or not and all the stuff that we've talked about in podcasts. And then I think the third one would be like, make sure you use objective measurements to guide your nutrition. Stop thinking so much about how you feel or what so-and-so told you on social media, but let's check in on weight, body comp, performance, maybe some of the health markers that are measured annually at your MD doctor physical, and use those to guide your nutrition plan versus necessarily slick marketing or influencers. Yeah.
Take it. Okay. That was the first of our hotcakes. The second one is an article I came across on CNN. It is about ultramarathoner named Courtney Dauwalter, Dauwalter. And apparently she's crushing ultramarathon races. She's a 4-time ultra running magazine, ultra runner of the year. And she holds multiple course records for obscenely long races in the US and abroad. So here's the little site. It was, it's CNN, so it's not a huge deep dive, but here's this section. I'm just going to read it because there was a couple things in here that I wanted to get your take on. It says this: given the extraordinary distances covered, you might expect her to have a forensic outlook on the craft with rigorous training schedules, extreme diets, and advanced technology galore. In fact, the opposite is true. She says, pre-race, I'll usually go with pizza. Pizza is easy to find almost anywhere. It's predictable and it's delicious. Afterwards, I'm often craving a beer and just a huge pile of nachos. With regards to coaching, she believes that there is no replacement for intuition. Indeed, she does not wear a heart rate monitor. And then last quote, the best way for me to train right now is no coach, no plan, and really just tuning into those signals, physical, mental, emotional. She says, then every day I assess myself and see where I'm at for the day. Okay, so there's like 3 or 4 little questions in here that I have for you. The first is the most obvious one, and the one that everybody asks you, which is like pizza before a long race. What's going on with that? How come she doesn't completely fall apart?
Yeah, she's a great example of that last point I made. Like, the body has remarkably wide strike zones. Mm-hmm. You don't need the perfect plan. She's just crushing her athletic endeavors. Which brings up another point. It's also some genetics at play as well. But yeah, I mean, this is understanding the demands of the sport and the activity level that you're choosing. And she's doing, I think it's 50, if not 100-mile races. I mean, good luck doing that on apples. You know, we've certainly talked about this concept before with CrossFit Games athletes. And why do we think that the CrossFit Games athletes, their diets look like they're not good quality? And it's because there's no way you're going to get to 5,000 plus calories a day on apples and broccoli and salmon. You have to put in some of the processed foods. And so certainly somebody who's about to go run 50 or 100 miles or after that, they've burned through so much. The only way to accumulate the amount of calories they need is through this processed food. And so I think, again, we have to just be nuanced in understanding, okay, what's the context of this individual? And this is a totally appropriate nutrition choice for her.
The next question is kind of a two-parter, which is she says she doesn't wear a heart rate monitor. And then, you know, the best way for me to train right now is no coach, no plan, really just tuning into these signals. And so a couple things in there that are interesting to me. One, we've talked about wearables and the general maybe lack of need for wearables. So it's interesting, just as somebody else who's doing this at a very, very high level, you would think she's got 17 different wearables on to make sure her X, Y, and Z is doing what they're supposed to. But then what's also interesting is she kind of says like, oh, I just listen to my body, right? Which is something that you've talked about as perhaps not the best strategy. You know, you actually just mentioned it before, like, let's get some objective data. Yeah. And she clearly has a lot of that, right? She ran the last 50 miler in X and whatever. But so I'm curious, like, just the mixing and marrying of those two ideas of lack of data and where we fall into trouble when we rely too much on it, and the listening to my body. And then, well, what happens if we don't do that very well?
Yeah, I think that's a great point and a great kind of call out that, I don't really subscribe much to the listening to your body. And I think it does require me to put a little bit of nuance on that. If listening to your body gets the results that you want, listen to your body. I think the difference is, because we actually talk about listening to your body when we were reviewing the gut health recent episode on Netflix. And, you know, I gave the examples of somebody who was trying to lose weight, that listening to their body could be quite difficult because right now the signals for them to eat are telling them to probably eat more processed food. And that's an example of where listening to your body is leading you astray. Now, in Courtney's case, listening to her body is leading her to winning lots of races. There's a big difference there. So it's sort of like kind of putting the whole picture together and understanding if listening to your body is getting you in the direction that you want to go. And so, in her case, this is a perfect example. And I think I've said it before with high-level athletes, I have little interest in trying to change their nutrition or training regime, because you look at their performance and that's what should guide if you're going to make changes. You know, if she was performing terribly, okay, Courtney, listening to your body's not going so well. Conversely, she's acing everything. So why are we going to change the inputs right now? I need a reason to change the inputs.
Yeah, it's really interesting. It reminds me of something that mutual friend Ben Bergeron, when he was training really high level athletes, he would say, like, the first thing I asked them every day before training is like, how do you feel today? Right. And it wasn't just hey, how you doing today? It wasn't that. It was like, this is good data that you're going to give me back, as long as you don't say fine. Right. And that was sort of the rules. Like, you're not allowed to just tell me I'm fine. Right. Yeah. Because how you feel before that not only might change the training day, but might give us some understanding of, well, where are we now in this particular cycle that we're in, where we're going, et cetera. And so that to me is really interesting. And you sort of touched on it, which is you've got to learn how to actually ascertain how you feel so that it's useful data to you, quote unquote data, and not unhelpful. Because there is a really big difference in truly understanding how you feel. And she said, you know, how I feel, whereas the physical, mental, and emotional, like that's real work to do to actually understand yourself. How do I feel physically? How do I feel mentally? How do I feel emotionally? So that you can make changes based on that, and not, well, I'm tired and I'm sore and my Whoop says I should do X. That's a world of difference to understand, to really understand, and just like, it kind of feels like it feels different today.
This is also some of what experience gets high level athletes, and why people who are winners become so much more, I don't know, dangerous is the right word or whatever. But now they've lived through enough of those days when they're like, I feel okay, I'm going to push it, and saw the effect of it. You know what I mean? And so she's had all of these wins now. And so there's times at which she might be thinking, I don't know if I feel great, but I trained before, so I'm going to go for it. Where when you don't have all of that experience, you're probably not going to always make the best decision. So I would be willing to bet there's been times when she hasn't gotten it right. But then the more experience that she gets under her belt and the more wins, she knows which way to kind of lean, even in the days when she's like, I don't know if I feel, quote, 100%. She knows kind of which way to bet on, I should say.
Yeah, interesting. The last little bit is perhaps not nutrition related anyways, but it's just a quote that I had in there that was in the article that I really liked. I just kind of wanted your take on. She says, in general, I think everybody's bars are just a little bit too low, and that we should raise the bar for ourselves. We should go after the thing that sounds a little bit crazy or sounds a little bit too difficult and just see, because why not? And again, I don't think there's a nutrition question, but maybe there is. Maybe you could turn it into a nutrition question. But I just love your thoughts on that particular philosophy.
Wow, life philosophy, Patrick.
That's right. This is why I like hotcakes, because I can somehow slide in EC's life philosophy.
Wow, life philosophy. I think I generally like it. I think to temper it with a little bit of realism, which I probably try to do most often, is you probably aren't going to be able to do this in many avenues of your life. Like, you're not going to be able to go after the athletic goal to do a little crazy, but then also really develop the career side, right? You might not be able to be the same parent that you might be if you are doing all of the athletic development, right? And so I think there are still going to be trade-offs to be able to pull that off. But yeah, we all have to make trade-offs in our life about how we want to spend our time and what's going to be meaningful to us, and also maybe valuable, or however we see value and how we can kind of serve society or something like that. So I think it's great. And I think that we should push ourselves, but also realize that we probably have to be selective in where we're going to do that. And we don't have the reserves or the time to really, quote, be crazy in like all avenues in life, right? You can't even be like, I don't know, even in like community service or public civic groups or something like that, you can't be all in on all of those and then also be, the career focused person and also be the athlete focused. It just doesn't, it doesn't work. So you kind of have to select where you're going to put more eggs than the other ones. It's interesting.
One of the things you said in the kind of answer previous, which is like, she's been, her specifically, she's been into these scenarios and these contexts, and she's done these things. And so she kind of understands, I've been here before. I can this is what this feels like, right? This is what mile 40 feels like in a 50-mile run. And what's interesting about this quote is like, I think that's really what she's saying is you've got to put yourself in places where you recognize, oh, this is just uncomfortable. This is okay though, because I've been uncomfortable before. And that I think is the place where a lot of people, ourselves included, of course, which is like, we just don't ever get to the edge where we really are learning anything. We never get past that spot of like, oh, I've been here before and this is okay, versus, well, this is a little uncharted. But I've been here, I've been somewhere similar to this before, and I know I'm going to be okay. So I'm not going to take 3 steps back. I'm just going to kind of plant my feet and see how long, or, let's see if I can stay here for longer. And what was that old Greg Glassman quote where you fail at the edges of your experience or something like that? That's kind of what I feel. That's kind of what I feel like this quote is about, which is recognizing that there's this little zone just beyond what you've done before, whereas all the learning happens. And we need to be able to push ourselves into that at least occasionally, whether it's sport or any other way, because that's where we actually recognize what we're capable of.
Yeah. No, I agree with that. I think why I pause is like, she's like the super, super, super top of what she's doing. I think she beats all the men not all, but I think she's beaten a lot of men at these races as well. I mean, she's at the upper echelon of amazing in this sport. And so that's different. I think what that's going to look like for a lot of people to kind of push themselves past the comfort zone is that you can do that and not reach the upper echelon of a professional sport.
Yep.
Because to reach the upper echelon of a professional sport is what I was trying to say, that to get to, quote, that level of crazy, there is a lot of sacrifices in other areas of your life, which might not be worth the trade-off, even if you have the genetics or interest to do it. Yeah.
Yeah, agree with that. Okay, that was our second hot cake. Our third one. This is an article from news organization called Axios, and it's about the return of pre-pandemic levels of how often Americans eat or cook at home. And so a little excerpt. People in the U.S. and Canada ate the fewest number of home-cooked meals per week out of any region in the world in 2022, averaging only 8.4 meals per week, the same rate that they exhibited in 2019, again, pre-pandemic. In the U.S., specifically, the eating at home rate reached a historic low last year at 8.2 meals per week compared to 9.4 seen in 2020. And maybe that's 9.4 was where we raised up in the midst of a pandemic. So here's my one. Before I ask any more specific questions, like, I was shocked at this number because maybe my life is just not that. But are you shocked when you look at those numbers? You work with a ton of people on nutrition, obviously. So I imagine you get at least a gauge of where and how often people are eating and or cooking at home.
Yeah, it was surprising to me for sure, because I mean, I was like, wow, okay, I'm probably way off with my recommendations, because in my masterclass, I routinely say I think people can easily eat out 3 times a week and still reach their goals. I mean, but this is saying that potentially people are eating out 14 times a week, right?
Yeah.
And so I'm like, wow, okay, maybe I am out of touch with how often people are eating out. It's hard because I'm kind of similar to you, or I think I don't eat out that much, and I probably am close to about 3 times a week. So this was quite shocking to me. It's interesting. I was just also curious on a little bit more of the data collection. What are they considering everything here? Is this, is to-go coffee in the morning and that eating out? Do you know what I mean? And if there's a snack with it, but not a full meal. So I was a little bit curious on how it broke down in terms of the data, but certainly it's still averaging to less than half meals. And so, yeah, I was very surprised.
Yeah, I'm with you. Like maybe 2-3 tops a week of eating. And again, but like, context is different, right? Like it's with a couple kids, it's quite frankly difficult to go out to eat that often because they end up throwing things.
Not enjoyable.
And so my first question to you is like, let's assume that the data is accurate enough, right? For our conversation, would it be possible in your mind to eating out that often for a person to really get or reach their aesthetic, their weight, their performance goals if 50 to 60 to 70% of their meals were, again, call it commercially made?
Yeah, it's possible. It's pretty darn hard. I think we have that episode that's like practical strategies for dining out or something that's a while back. And, to get a meal under 600 calories is pretty tough. And so if you're kind of doing that multiple times a day, plus another meal and maybe snacks at home or something to get to your caloric target, it's going to be hard for most people. And so, yeah, you could do it, but you're going to have to be really keyed into the nutrition information. You're going to have to be really keyed into the realities of food from restaurants tends to be very calorically dense, especially because of fat. You're going to have to be very honest about that to get after a goal. So theoretically possible, practically quite difficult to do.
Yeah. And part of that practicality or the difficulty, it would be in just the getting, and this is a question, just getting a really, like, as close to an accurate sense of the numbers of what you're getting. Because like I'm pretty good at seeing a plate of food and saying, okay, like I can estimate how much whatever potatoes or how much that steak is.
Sure.
You would probably get closer than me, but most of us aren't you, right? And so like just being able to really, again, if you're really eating out that often, even if you're off a little bit, each one of those meals, that's a good amount.
Yeah. Yeah. One of the things that I recommend, I know I've done it on social media and talk about it with my masterclass, is when you go out to eat and you don't, quote, know what it is. I think a lot of times people will just kind of look at their plate and be like, oh, okay, that's about 4 ounces of potatoes and this amount of steak. And certainly that's better than not doing it. But my recommendation for most people is to look up what I call a sister restaurant and find the equivalent meal and use that. And so, like, let's say that you're getting the fajita meal. Instead of trying to be like, okay, I think it was this much sour cream and this many tortillas and this much veggie mix, is just to look up the fajita meal at Chili's or pick another chain Mexican restaurant and use that. Yep. Because that is going to represent more of the calories that are in these meals than your best estimate, partially because portions and, again, fat content is so high that you just won't even get close. And so I think doing something like that is going to get people in a better ballpark and be more realistic than trying to do this piecemeal approach, which I think the piecemeal approach is going to result in a larger calorie delta. And exactly what you're saying is like, it's going to be really hard to get there. Yeah. Where this is going to be a more realistic, although still not perfectly accurate approach.
Yeah. And there's the other thing that happens, because it's happened to me, which you've talked about before, which is like, and I like that you just clearly we're at like a Chipotle here in our example, which is like, okay, I got a burrito. There's no way for me to know, like, what I watched them make it. I can't tell you what, like, the measurements of the various things. And so hands up, I guess it doesn't matter. I guess I'll start again tomorrow. And if you're eating out 14 times a week, that's 14 opportunities for you to say, not possible for me to measure this or to get a good sense of it. I'll start again tomorrow. And if that even only happens once or twice or 3 times in a week, you don't really have a good sense of what happened that week.
Yeah, totally. And this is where again, concept of trade-offs, we'll probably have to put a link to that one in the show notes. But yeah, I give people strategies to navigate eating out. And I know that there is this error that happens, which is one of the reasons that I say kind of 3 times a week I think is feasible, because I know that there's some error there. But even with these strategies, I think we can get close enough to make progress. But if you're continuing to eat out, and even if it's at the 3 times a week, or maybe it's higher, and you're not seeing your goals, then one of the trade-offs is, okay, well, I'm not getting accurate enough. I'm not getting close enough to what I need to do. And so I need to then start making meals at home. I need to give up the convenience to start getting after what I want, right? And so people can try these strategies, see what they can do for them, and then make adjustments based off of that. But yeah, definitely just throwing up the hands and being like, I don't know what it is, keeps people in this perpetual cycle of not making progress, for sure.
Yeah. Last thing, and then we'll wrap this up. But because of the first hot cake and this one, I'm thinking about, there's a book called Your Money or Your Life, and I'm blanking on the author's last name. Her first name's Robin. And one of the things she says is, you start, and it's obviously a personal finance book. And one of the first strategies in it is to actually track everything you spend your money on and then create categories. And this is pretty classic. But then one of the things she says is like, get really specific or personal with what those categories are, right? It's not food. It's food I bought because I was too lazy to make food, right? And that was an example she had. So that
I don't want to see that category.
Yeah. But I think it's really interesting because like, if you hear these numbers, like, and I'm pretty close to 10 meals out every, I think it would be a valuable exercise to say, okay, how many of those meals is because I didn't put any work, or I didn't put any prep into making sure I had meals for the day. And so I had to stop and get something. How much of it is because, well, part of my job is taking people out to lunch? How much of it is, it was Friday night and I was just too tired to cook? Like all of and you actually get a really good sense of the reasons why you or we are eating out or not making our own meals as often as we are, because some of those are probably a little bit BS reasons. Like with a little bit of work, you wouldn't have to go out to eat. And maybe some of those are, my wife and I go out on Thursday nights and like, that's the one all right, I'm keeping that one. That one's not going away. But like the 2 lunch meals that I have at work, cause I just can't bring myself to bring a salad to okay, I can get rid of those. Like, and actually being able to identify the ones that have real valid reasons why I go out to eat and the ones that are just me being perhaps a little bit lazy or a little bit like lack of preparation or whatever it might be. I can imagine thinking about it in that way would be a really helpful way to say, okay, I really like this isn't working, eating out 12 times a week. How do I get that down to 4 or to your recommendation of 3? Cool. EC says 3 is okay. I can still do it. What are the 3 ones I'm going to keep? Well, I'm going to keep them because this reason, and this reason, and everything else. Because I've identified the actual reasons why it's happening, I can start to put some solutions in place. So it doesn't feel like I need to, it's because I want to.
Yeah. No, I agree. I think that's great. I'm not going to give up my pre-cooked frozen grilled chicken breast strips that I buy at the grocery store for convenience that are too expensive. But that bucket of the pre-prepared stuff that I would buy would be quite high. But that's a trade-off for me. That's exactly another example. Now, it's not out to eat, but it's like, how do I buy stuff at the grocery store that makes this like uber convenient? Yeah.
Yeah. Love it. Okay. Thank you, Steve. That's fun. We haven't done hotcakes in a while, so thank you for letting me do another hotcakes. I appreciate it.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody out there, for listening. Thank you for your ratings and your reviews. Thank you for sharing the show with your friends. DC and I will be back next week for a brand new episode of the Consistency Project podcast.